Alrighty, well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another edition of our volunteer webinar series for volunteer engagement. We're really excited to have Rebecca with us today to talk about practical tips to improve volunteer retention. Before we get started, I do want to remind everyone that the session is being recorded, so please feel free to chat any questions into the chat box, and I'm sure at the end we will also have time if anyone wants to unmute themselves to ask any questions about the presentation. That's also a good key reminder to, if you don't have yourself on mute, please go ahead and do that now just to make sure we reduce any of the background noise. I will do my best if I hear anything to mute people, not out of disrespect, just out of respect for Rebecca, so we can hear all the great information that she has. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca. Thank you so much for being here. We're excited to hear your presentation today.
Thank you so much, Sydney. And I'm excited to talk to you all about improving your volunteer retention. First, just a little bit about me. I am Rebecca Nofi. I'm the Volunteer and Community Engagement Manager at the Greater Nashville Regional Council since 2018. And I've been in volunteer engagement for about 10 years. And at GNRC, I really had the unique opportunity to build the volunteer program from the ground up, which has been very exciting. I'm also a certified volunteer administrator since last year and have a master's in sociology. So I'm just going to share some of my experiences and things I've read with you today and hope that it will help you in retaining your volunteers a little bit longer. If you're wondering about my accent, people always ask. I was born and raised in Germany, and love led me to move to Tennessee 11 years ago. If you all want to introduce yourselves in the chat, feel free to do so. Love to learn a little bit about all of you as well. And if you'd like to connect with me after the presentation, or if you have any questions, you can email me or find me on LinkedIn and message me there, and I'll be happy to talk further. The Greater Nashville Regional Council is one of the 9 development districts, and GNRC operates in the 13-county area that you can see here. So just to give you a little bit of background on where I'm working. And we provide a regional forum for elected officials, industry experts, and community leaders, as well as community members to just come together and discuss issues and share ideas. We have a variety of different programs, and I'm managing the volunteer component for all of these programs. So we offer aging and disability services, economic and community development, local and regional planning, and business lending. And these programs really are to ensure that Middle Tennessee cities and counties remain eligible and competitive for state and federal funds. And we can really make our communities here better and livable for the long term. And we also sometimes help with extending staffing capacity by, giving our staff to some of the local governments to kind of help out with some different projects that they have going on. Then the policy and government affairs, as well as research and analytics, as well as the volunteer program, then really support all the different things that we do and try to help streamline the process. We also have a volunteer portal that we operate in those 13 counties. So if you're interested and want to be part of sharing your volunteer opportunities there, you're welcome to contact me and I can give you some more information. The goal there is really to connect volunteers with opportunities in Middle Tennessee and make volunteering more accessible for everyone. And now to the topic. We're talking about volunteer retention today. So I wanted to make sure we all start with the same definition of what retention means. So the Oxford English Language Dictionary defines retention as continued possession, use, or control of something. So when I'm talking about volunteer retention moving forward, I'm using the word in the sense that volunteers feel appreciated and valued at your organization and therefore continue to stay with your organization as active volunteers. With people moving, changing careers, and more project-based volunteer roles, I would measure retention by measuring whether or not an individual completes the role that they signed up for. So not necessarily just by the years they're staying with the organization, because some people might sign up for a specific project that has a defined end. So if they completed that project, we would count that towards retention. So volunteer retention is very closely connected to the elements in the volunteer engagement cycle. And so in my opinion, the first step to improving volunteer program retention is to really take an honest look at the volunteer engagement cycle and how you're doing with each of those elements. So this is what the volunteer engagement cycle looks like. You start with a needs assessment and planning for volunteer engagement. So making sure that the needs that your organization had and those that are appropriate for volunteers can be filled. So kind of really thinking through that process. It's very crucial to gain a good understanding of what the different roles can be and outlining them well to then find volunteers for those roles. So in the recruitment phase, you would be finding the right people for those positions and setting expectations for the volunteer role. And then once you've accepted a volunteer into the position, you would want to make sure to give them a good orientation to your organization and role-specific training, as well as any ongoing training to evolve in the role and help them be set up for success. Then supervision and evaluation of the volunteer in the role should, of course, happen continuously throughout their engagement. And then you also have volunteer recognition and recognizing all the accomplishments that your volunteers are having. So this cycle is kind of, circular, but then also, supervision, evaluation, as well as recognition and training. Those are always parts that are going to happen at all points of the volunteer engagement as well. And they all influence volunteer retention. So instead of spending all your time just on recruiting new volunteers, and I would recommend focusing your biggest effort on retaining your existing volunteers, because your current volunteers can then organically help you recruit some new people to the program, because they can share about their experience and really tell others and get others excited about volunteering with your organization. And that will then save you a lot of time and effort on onboarding new people, because you'll be able to keep your current volunteers. So before we dive deeper, I would love to learn a little bit about you and what areas of the volunteer engagement cycle you think needs the most attention at your organization. If you all could just drop in the chat the number. So 1 would be program planning and needs assessment, 2 would be recruitment, 3 would be orientation and training, and 4 supervision and evaluation, and 5 recognition. What is the area where you feel like you need, the most attention in your program? The mix of 1 and 2. Anybody else? I'm going to drop their numbers in the chat. Okay, see another 2 and 4. So it sounds like it's a bit of a mix of all. Another 2, 2 again, 4. Okay, that's great. So let's start with planning and needs assessment. So when you're planning for your volunteer engagement and looking at your organization's need, I recommend trying out the volunteer involvement framework, and I have that resource for you the link later on. And that framework will help you place the needs that your organizations have into 4 different quadrants. Strategic volunteer roles have the goal to meet your agency needs as well as leverage the interest, motivations, and skill of today's volunteers. So the table is, of course, focused in those linear boundaries, but it's worth noting that, the different quadrants are not mutually exclusive. So you can definitely want to make sure that volunteers can move between different positions, and you would want ideally have opportunities available within each of those 4 quadrants. So that over a lifetime, a volunteer might, start out with an episodic affiliation-focused opportunity, but then might move on to something more long-term. So you want to try to create a path between those different quadrants as well. So we're going to go through a couple of examples for each of them to make it a little bit easier to understand what's meant. So a short-term affiliation-focused opportunity could be those corporate service days, a park cleanup, could be a run walk or bike fundraiser, could be a painting project or letter writing. So something that's short-term and has a low profile. It's easy for somebody to get started on. Then in the more skill-focused and episodic, you might have things like a sports club teaching a youth group a particular skill, or hosting youth for an event. You might have students completing a degree requirement, so they need to complete a specific amount of hours or for an internship or a project. Or it could be a chef who's preparing a meal for a fundraiser, or a marketing professional helping with some social media at your organization. Then in the affiliation focus and long-term opportunities, you might have somebody like a youth mentor, troop leader, Sunday school teacher, could be a senior ride driver, a hospice or nursing home visitor, a park host or docent, or a thrift store manager. And there's many more examples. And in the long-term and skill-focused, you could think of, pro bono legal counsel, a physician or nurse or counselor helping with no-cost medical service. You could have a Medicare counselor there, volunteer firefighters, or a board member, so somebody who puts in more time and commits to a longer service from the start. An example that we often see organizations get sucked into are those day of service projects that are created in a response to a request from a business. I don't know if you're getting these a lot, but I have gotten those quite a bit in my career so far. And this is often difficult because they'll say, yeah, I have a group of 15 people and you would love to come on, July 15th and help out. What can we do? And if you get those requests, if you're just trying to come up with something that's not really needed and you say, okay, you guys can paint this room, or you will find that the group will come and they'll do the project, but they'll notice that that wasn't really a need and that it was kind of more busy work that you pulled out of thin air just to not disappoint the business that asked, or the school, or whomever that is. In those cases, I really encourage you to try and go back and educate those corporate groups or schools and say, we might not be able to use 15 volunteers for this one-day project, but we would love to look into more of a long-term partnership. We could really use help with our social media and our newsletters, and we would love to use some of your marketing volunteers to help us build a strategy there for the next year. Maybe they could make some newsletter templates for us, or looking at some other ways that that business can help you but still bring you forward in your mission and not create extra work. Because that will, have a bad effect for the for the corporation, they'll notice, okay, this wasn't really needed. And they feel like, they could have done something different. And by letting them know that there are other needs that your organization has and how they can help out by looking at it from a different perspective, you might gain a long-term relationship with that business. Yeah, I do recommend checking out this framework and the resources for that later on. I will share those with you. There's a lot of great examples, and it walks you through all the steps of, filling this out for your organization and really looking at all the different needs that you might have and that could be fulfilled by volunteers. So as we're thinking about these different volunteer roles, I want to take a closer look at then creating those role descriptions. And that's my first tip. Really creating a great volunteer role description is key to recruiting then the right people for that position. So be sure whenever you create those role descriptions that you can relate the role back to your overall mission and show what impact the role will have. So the good volunteer role description will always allow you to look for the right person to fill this role. So you will want to make sure that your volunteer role description has all of these elements here. So you want to have a compelling title of the position. You want to list the location, a short description of your organization and mission, and then who will be supervising this person. What do you want the volunteers to achieve, and what will be their responsibilities, and how does that fit in with the overall goal of your organization? You want to look at closely what kind of skills and abilities are needed for this position, what are the benefits to the volunteer, what training and support will be available for them, and really think through the time commitment. Don't make it too unrealistic. So it's really hard to find volunteers, to commit upfront to something that's 2 years long. So you want to make sure that it's a reasonable requirement. And then also really explain your screening process and think through any physical requirements. And try not to be too narrow there and limit, applicants with a disability or something if that's not really required and something that you couldn't find, some other way to make it happen. All of this down. Of course, you don't have to use that full long role description for your recruitment. I actually recommend, shortening that and making that very specific to the people that you want to recruit, making it a targeted message. But having this written out in all detail and then also going through that once you are talking with the volunteer and making sure you're both on the same page as far as, what is needed, what the reporting requirements might be, is very important and will really help you find the right person for the position. So they're not going in there expecting something different. Yeah, and when you put together the recruitment message for this position, you can make it very specific to the people who might be interested in the opportunity. So if you want to reach out to students for this specific opportunity, you want to make it, compelling to them. So they might be interested. Students are always interested in, gaining career experience or fulfilling any hour requirements for volunteering for their school. So you'll want to put that in the recruitment message that you will be able to confirm their volunteer time, and they'll be able to gain these specific skills through the opportunity. So searching for the right fit. So after putting all this volunteer description together, who the right volunteers might be for this opportunity. You want to consider who your audience is for each volunteer opportunity you're trying to fill. And that will then help you craft that very strategic message. And if you can, tap into, anticipate what might be the information that this type of person or this group of person needs, and what needs do they have or want to fulfill through volunteering. If you can tap into those motivations that you're anticipating, that will really help you in the recruitment process. So let's say you're trying to recruit parents for an opportunity. You'll want to make sure that you offer some kind of solution for childcare needs, or give them very precise, information on the start and end times if you know that, they're going to have to pick up their kids from school afterwards. So if you're targeting that group, you want to make sure you give them that specific information. Yeah, and also be very specific in what skills would be needed to complete the task. So you can really look at, are those retired professionals that could fulfill that role? And then you want to target those specific groups and tell them that you're trying to leverage those specific skills and reach out to them. You can also try and leverage your current volunteers. They are often very effective in speaking from their own experience, and the excitement that they have for your organization will shine through. So if you can involve some of your current volunteers that are happy and just ask them, hey, do you have some friends in the field, or neighbors, somebody who might be interested, and they can share their experience. And if you're going to any recruitment fairs or events, have a volunteer come with you and share from their experience. That always shines a lot brighter than having a staff member who obviously has to say that your organization is great, right? Be the only one at the table. I also encourage you to look at your intake system. So from the point a volunteer reads your recruitment message to the first, step of completing the application or contacting you. So what does that process look like? And does that work well? Is that a good experience for the volunteer? Are they getting, immediate response after putting the application in? Is there going to be a confirmation message if you're using the online system? Does it say like, hey, we've got your application and we'll be reaching out to you in the next 48 hours or whatever it is, so that volunteers know what to expect and they're not submitting the application and then it takes you several weeks to get back to them. At that point, they might have moved on to something else that also seemed interesting. So being very responsive and really laying out what your intake process looks like from the front end so people know what to expect is very important in getting them in the door. Okay. Yeah, if you can understand your volunteers' passions, interests, and motivations, that will help you determine the fit for the volunteer projects. So you can really, if you can find out something about them in the volunteer interview when you're talking to them, learn why they want to volunteer for this and what they're passionate about. I found often that people don't really know. I mean, they're attracted by your organization somehow and they reached out because the opportunity may interested them. But sometimes the opportunity they actually applied for is not always the opportunity that's the best fit for them. And so by taking the time to talk to them and really finding more about them, their motivations, you can make that good match because all your different opportunities and everything your organization has to offer. So sometimes steering them in a different direction and placing them in a role that they hadn't initially applied for might be more beneficial and keep them engaged long term. Okay. Let's go to the next one. So in tip 3, promise joy. 2/3 of employees are just getting by at work each day. Emotionally and intellectually, they are disengaged from what they are doing. That's why the promise of joy in a volunteer role is an incredible way of being of service to someone. Never underestimate what it might mean to someone if you can offer them a renewed sense of purpose, possibility, excitement, or fun through the volunteer opportunity. So your organization has a lot to offer. You have a great mission. So there's purpose already written in there in your, volunteer journey, and making that connection between even the smallest task to your overall mission. Like, we all always have those envelope stuffing opportunities. They're not the most popular with volunteers, but some like to do them. And so even that opportunity, like connected to the bigger mission, why are we stuffing these envelopes, explain, who these envelopes are going to and what the mail is going to achieve and how that fits into your overall program goal. Because in that way, it becomes meaningful to the volunteer and they don't just sit there doing a menial task over and over again. But they feel like they're still contributing to the bigger goal. And make it fun. Like envelope stuffing is not super fun, but if you can get a group of volunteers together and they're all doing it at the same time, you can put on some fun music or have some treats for them while they're completing those tasks. You can turn those opportunities that seem maybe boring into something more meaningful and providing some of the social connections so many of our volunteers crave or have as a motivation for volunteering. If you can focus on the impact of the volunteer opportunity when recruiting the volunteers, because volunteers who derive meaning from their work are more than 3 times as likely to stay with their current volunteer organization. Then we get to tip 4, cultivate curiosity. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen twice as much as we speak. Cultivating curiosity is one of those concepts. Lean in and just show that you are interested in your volunteers. Ask them about themselves, show them that you're interested in what they have to say, and that is a great collaboration skill that will lead you to understand your volunteers and what they truly desire much better. So you find the opportunity to connect with them and find out what really drives them or makes them happy, what brings them forward, and you can connect that motivation to their volunteer opportunity. You will really be able to retain them for a long time, and they'll be a fan of your organization moving forward. If you can keep volunteer files, either physical or in person, you could, write down some notes on each of your volunteers, because I don't know how many you have, but if you have a larger group of volunteers, it's sometimes hard to keep it all in your head. And just write down some of those things that they mentioned they're interested in. They like football. They really like going outdoors. Just, write yourself some quick notes. And when you're having some check-ins with them later or seeing them, you can, take a quick look at it and reference those things back to really show your volunteers you care about them personally and not just about the work they're doing for your organization. Creating that, community is very important. So motivations for volunteering, I've mentioned them a lot, and I believe the last webinar in the series was about motivations for volunteering. I missed that one, unfortunately. First one I missed because I was out on vacation, but I believe that Kristen Dillard talked about the 6 different motivations buckets that drive volunteering. And I'm going to just go over them very briefly if there's anybody else who missed her webinar. But if not, you can probably go back to the YouTube channel and rewatch that. But you often have those volunteers who say they want to make a difference, they want to give back to the community or a specific cause. So their motivated by values. Then we have the career-motivated volunteers. So those are often people who are still in college, so they're looking to start their career, or somebody who is transitioning to a new position. So they're looking to learn new skills through volunteering and kind of develop personally and professional through the volunteer experience. Some are looking to gain understanding about themselves and their world through volunteering. So those would often say they want to learn a new skill or try something new, or they want to get to know the community or your client base better. And then we have the socially motivated volunteers. So they are looking for community connection, want to make some friends, or set an example for their children, or just get that recognition in their peer group. If it's seen as volunteering is in and cool, then they want to be part of that and be recognized as part of that group. Then we have protective as our motivation. So those are often people who feel like they're really fortunate in life, so they want to feel better by helping others. Or you hear somebody saying, I want to pay it forward, you know, or help somebody less fortunate. Sometimes it's fulfilling a spiritual need or obligation. And then volunteers who are looking for enhancement. Let's say, you know, they're looking for a change of pace. They want to do something positive, practice gratitude. So they are just looking for a positive influence in their life through volunteering. And keeping those, you know, 6 buckets in mind as you're going through the interview process, and try to, you know, listen for those specific things they're saying so that you can note that and reach back to those motivations when you're talking about the impact and when you're recognizing them through their volunteer journey with you. Then my tip 5, set clear expectations in the recruitment process. So if you find you're often losing volunteers who have completed training and then volunteer for maybe a month or 2, and then they drop away. Sometimes they don't even, it's like they drop off the face of the earth. You never hear from them again. They just disappear on you. The reason often is that we didn't describe the opportunity and the expectations well enough in the beginning. So if you see that, try to work on really being more blunt in describing what the opportunity looks like. So if there's something, you know, part of your volunteer opportunity that's very repetitive, be upfront about that. Or if you have very stringent reporting requirements for the position, tell them. If you talking to a volunteer who has a full-time job, but you know, kind of the 8 to 5, and you're really needing volunteers during the day, then that's probably not a good fit. So like, you know, brushing it up and saying, yeah, there's also some evening or weekend opportunities, but just not as many, might just not be, you know, good enough. You might really have to say, I'm sorry, I don't think it's a good fit. I think, you know, most of our volunteering for this opportunity happens through business hours. So let's look for something else and try to make a better match there for them. I'm sure there's something else that they could do that fits with their schedule. So you don't want to, you know, just accept them and make them feel good, and then, you know, it just doesn't turn out to be what they expected. So I've started being just really open about what it looks like, and that has helped us a lot in retaining people longer. Okay, then tip 6, provide adequate orientation and training. So the orientation and training you provide to your volunteers is basically their compass for their volunteer journey. So you want to make sure to provide a general orientation to your organization as well as role-specific training. Make sure to also explain what your organization's values and mission are, and set expectations for what behavior is expected throughout the volunteer engagement. So how you want volunteers as part of a team to treat each other, and what it looks like, what values you have, or what the goals of your volunteer program are. You want to be very upfront with that and make sure they understand that, and they can say that to the next person, so they're carrying your mission forward there. If you're working a lot with volunteer teams, ask everyone to make a commitment to your organization's mission and each other in the team right up front, because that will then address the two fundamental human needs of belonging and being part of something bigger than oneself, because they're part of this team. And you'll be able to generate maximum impact by addressing a collaborative code of conduct before the actual collaboration to the volunteer engagement begins. So the key is here to really have everyone on the team agree to this, what your code of conduct is for your organization and for this team, and laying out what their mission is as a team to accomplish for your organization. And then really letting everybody give the others permission. So if, I'm not behaving the right way, if I'm showing any negative behaviors, it's okay for the rest of my team to call me out on it. And because we all want to serve the mission and not get into this cliquey behavior of one talks about the other one behind their back, and getting all this negative feeling in there. So creating an open and safe space for your volunteers to work together. And given how busy many of today's volunteers are, making training as flexible as possible helps to make volunteering also more accessible to more people. So if you can create some online training so that volunteers can participate on their own schedule. We have started doing some of those online trainings for our volunteers. And then I do offer a follow-up, either in person or as a video call, to just ask them, what questions they had during the training, what things were unclear, and just kind of, nail down the big couple things that I really wanted them to know after the training, and then making sure that all went well and they can feel like they have all the information they need to be successful in their volunteer role. And then also don't forget to train the staff who will be supervising the volunteers on a day-to-day basis. Many staff members might have never worked with volunteers before, and they might not know how to best engage your volunteers. So staff should learn about the different expectations for working with volunteers, some best practices, and also let them know how to contact you if you're in charge of the volunteers as the overall supervisor. So they can come to you if they have any challenges with the volunteers, or if they have ideas to improve volunteers' engagement or want to shape the volunteer position in a different way. So making sure that the other staff members that engage with the volunteers are on board with you and treat them in the same way that you want to treat them. That's important to give volunteers a good experience. Tip 7, learn to be an exceptional leader. I love that picture of the kitty cats. We cannot hurt cats, but we can, however, learn to lead them so that they choose to follow. Yeah, leading volunteers sometimes can feel like you're trying to hurt cats. So question for you, what makes a great leader that you want to follow? If you want to put your responses in the chat, I'd love to hear from you what adjectives, attributes a great leader has in your mind. Leading by example. Lifelong learner, yes. Motivational, yeah, that's important too. They motivate you to go the extra mile, right? Okay, thank you. I recently read a book, Leading Without Authority by Keith Ferrazzi. And I thought I will share some of his inspirational ideas because I think they translate really well into leading volunteers in a volunteer program. If you're like me, in your role, you're working with a lot of different program managers, your executive director, your board, and everybody has kind of their own goals in mind. So you're working really with a lot of people that you don't have direct authority over. So in those partnerships, it's very essential to providing a good experience for your volunteers, though, because they will all also interact with them, and they will only stay if they have a good experience across the organization and not just with you. So I wanted to share some of his ideas with you. Keith says real leadership is not about telling others what to do. It's about inviting others, encouraging others, getting others excited about new possibilities. True leadership doesn't presume to have the answers. In fact, the opposite is true. The best leaders start with an open mind and invite others to seek solutions with them. Truly great leadership is about genuinely caring about the other person's success as mutually learn and grow. It's absolutely crucial to leading others when you have no positional authority. So having that real interest in the other person and wanting them to grow. I felt like that really spoke to me to being a good volunteer leader. So the main concept in the book is that in order to lead without authority, we must operate with co-elevation, he calls it. And co-elevation is being defined as a mission-driven approach to collaborative problem solving through fluid partnerships and self-organizing teams. So if you as a leader of volunteers set out to lead with generosity and gratitude and forgiveness and celebration, it will be contagious and then greatly improve your volunteer retention across your organization. Co-elevation will also lead to great working relationships with all members of your team. Anyone who has a direct role in accomplishing your mission, which is retaining volunteers throughout your organization, needs to become part of your team. So if you're working with program partners, you're working with the volunteers, so they all need to be part of your team. And co-elevation transforms organizations through personal transformation. So it calls on everyone within an organization to exercise leadership in collaborative partnerships, regardless of what their title or position is. So even if you're just the volunteer coordinator, volunteer manager, you're not supervising anybody directly, you can still lead your team, those that you want to engage with your volunteers, by including them as active members of your team. So you want to consider their input and ideas and then create collaboration to lead without authority. So it's a great way to just kind of look beyond those limits that we have by our, hierarchy in organizations and, positional leadership. But by looking at it more of a, who is part of my team? Who do I need to retain these volunteers, give them a good experience by looking at what's your mission, for your volunteer program, and how can your volunteer program elevate, your mission, and then take a close look at what people need to be involved to achieve those goals, and then try to really create relationships with each person of that larger team. Try to create that collaboration to really receive, true collaboration and leadership, and being able to making a higher impact together as a team. Volunteers really bring so much variety and skill to the table. Try to utilize the ideas and different walks of life to your advantage. Ask them for their opinion, ask them for their input, and see if that can help you further your mission in maybe new ways. And the volunteers who are feeling valued and heard, they will build that strong connection to your organization and want to stay with you because they feel like, and they are truly making an impact for your organization and with you. And co-elevation also doesn't require a consensus, so you don't have to agree with everybody that you're working with, but it requires you to just take responsibility to decide to be a co-elevator, to stay in that relationship with your partners, other members of your team, and other program managers, even if you don't always see eye to eye, but you're trying to work together and form this relationship with the greater goal of serving your mission. And we need our volunteers to see the value in sharing their time, energy, and resources and knowledge with us. And by really inviting them to be part of this collaboration, we can offer that to them in return. They can really have a stake in what we're doing and have tremendous impact. To serve is to lead with generosity. To share is to open yourself up and build the bonds of true connection and commitment with others. So co-elevation demands effort, compromise and sacrifice, and casting off comfortable old habits. So you can ask yourself, when you're thinking about working with your volunteers or those program managers, try to think about, how can you be of service to them? How can you help them overcome challenges? What can you do to elevate them? How can you help them reach their dreams? Maybe the other program manager that also works with volunteers has some goals they want to achieve. How can you combine those goals? How can you look together and help them work better with your volunteers and show them how the volunteers can be of value to them, to then come to a better understanding and collaborate in meeting that goal. Choose to just really care, because nobody cares how much you know until they know you, how much you care. So if you show them that you truly care about reaching their mission, about helping them grow with your program, being part of their mission, it will really grant you incredible collaboration and start fostering those really deep relationships with your volunteers and your program managers, and it will bring you to a point where your volunteers really feel like they want to stay around. They're not just coming to fulfill a specific requirement. They are there because they want to be there. And they are excited about the impact they are making. And sometimes you might work with somebody you don't really like. I mean, we don't like everybody, but that's okay. So as long as you pay them respect and you genuinely want to help them still grow in service of the mission and being part of, the bigger picture, that still works. You want to just show them that you care about what's best for them, and you want to help them succeed at your organization and have a good experience volunteering. Also found that tell them a little bit of your story. That's a good way to get to know them. If you share, just a little bit about yourself, that will demonstrate that you are authentic and you're expressing your desire for a shared success. You could ask about different topics, ask about their family, their occupation, recreation, or dreams, and remember those things because they're part of those motivations as well that we were talking about earlier, and try to create the relationship by connecting on one of those levels. So being a little bit vulnerable for the sake of establishing authentic connection and trust with another person requires that you're honest, but it can really be a catalyst for forging those stronger bonds with your volunteers, and not just with your volunteers, with anybody who are wanting to create a relationship with. You want to be the first one to open up a little bit, and then we'll invite others to also open up to you. Vulnerability also boosts kind of psychological safety. So it'll allow your volunteers to be willing to speak up if they have ideas or a different opinion, or they have a criticism. So they're not feeling embarrassed because they feel like, you're open with them, so they can be open with you. And that will help, both you as a leader of the volunteers grow, but also it helps your volunteers grow as part of the volunteer team. And, don't be afraid to own your failures, or, where you didn't come up to par, or you had a part in, doing something wrong. Admit that and tell them, you want to change or be better. I know that's sometimes hard, but being open and accepting the criticism that others give you, or not getting into that competitive defensive mode, will create that safe space where you can be more approachable as a leader, and that in turn helps your volunteers be more engaged and committed and productive as a volunteer team. So I was looking up how to be more vulnerable. It's not always so easy, and some of us are, it's harder than others. But as I just said, own your wins and own your failures too. Don't be afraid to say, oh, this doesn't make me look good, but that's okay. You can own up to your mistakes. And, give you an example. Let's say you had a project and that was managed, you got it over the finish line by the time it was needed, but basically through the whole process, everything was running behind and really slow, and it was difficult to move forward. So if you had some part in making it slow or holding it up in some way, you can say, I was thrilled that we got over the finish line together, but I want to acknowledge my part in holding us up in the, in reviewing the different projects and what you submitted. And just tell them, I'm going to take steps to put on my calendar specific times to, look into that, so I'll have more time and can give feedback quicker, so it will not slow us down next time for another project. Then when being vulnerable, you also still want to consider your audience and your intent. So don't just want to share everything with everyone and just be like an open book. That would be too much. Before you just share something, ask yourself, what's my intention in sharing this information? And why am I sharing it with this specific person? And is it the right thing to do? So is it going to help this person, or is it really just going to help me to share this, or am I being gossipy? So, you want to ask yourself those questions. Asking questions can also be a great way to demonstrate vulnerability. because seeking clarification is inherently somewhat humbling activity. It requires that we call attention to the fact that we don't know everything. So you could always ask, for clarification when somebody talks to you, ask them to provide examples or see if they can provide you with some resources so you can learn more about what they're saying. Vulnerability can be a powerful tool to create those deeper relationships with your volunteers and colleagues. And maybe it's what you need to unlock that greater trust and more meaningful relationships, so the team can come together and you'll have greater volunteer retention because they really feel part of that team. Tip 8, create regular check-ins. Personal and professional check-ins with the individual volunteers or volunteer teams encourages each team member to just let you know what's of greatest importance in their lives right now, and will give you a chance to, react to that and incorporate that in your volunteer program. So if somebody has some personal issues going on right now, that may be why they're not showing up on time, or so you want to know about those things so you can be proactive about finding other solutions, maybe involving another volunteer who can step in and help out to make things easier. If your volunteers are not serving on site, you could schedule some short virtual check-ins for your remote volunteers and just kind of find out how they're doing that way, or pick up the phone. So you want to be willing to kind of go first, again, open up yourself a little bit and share, how it's going with the program, if there are any struggles, and then just invite them to share, what's on their mind. And the idea is really to just avoid the polite chit chat and trying to get to a deeper point of sharing with your volunteers or colleagues, so that you can then help each other with whatever their issues are or in moving forward. Tip 9, ask for and give feedback. So the co-development and being part of a volunteer team, being a volunteer leader, you want to help others grow and develop their skills, because that's what will really have that transformational performance as a result. So you want to reiterate, they're committed to your mission and your impact, and ensure that you can grow together. So taking the opportunity to ask your volunteers for feedback whenever you get the chance, and your colleagues for feedback on the program and what you can do better, trying to develop an open and honest conversation so that you can all grow together. Here's some tips for giving good feedback. Be careful in crafting the ask to offer feedback. You never want to be seem like you want to just put somebody down. You want to really set a time and a place to give feedback, and maybe you can say something like, I have some thoughts that you might find beneficial, and it has helped me when others have given me feedback in the past. So just make it non-threatening, and I would love to talk with you about this, and I'm not trying to influence you, but I'll want to give you this information, and then you can do with the information however you please. So give them the power to say they don't want to receive your feedback, they don't want to meet with you, but just make the suggestion you would love to share some feedback with them, because then they will be more likely to actually accept your feedback because they have decided they want to get your feedback. Then try to keep your feedback focused on the future. So on what someone can do to be more successful. So don't dwell on what went wrong, but trying to really celebrate those things that they have done well in the past, and then giving them some feedback to just make things better for them in the future. So giving the feedback to serve them. Also, I would never deliver personal feedback without requesting it in return. So you want to give them also the opportunity at another point. Should probably not be the same conversation, but just invite them to think about if there's anything you can do better or how you can help them better on their volunteer journey, so you can grow together. And then after you've given the feedback, let it go. Feedback is a gift, and once given, it's theirs, and they can do with the feedback as they please. So they can either, try and follow it. If they feel like, oh, this is not wanted, they can leave it. But make sure that you make sure that the recipient of your feedback really understands that they are in control with what to do with it. Because if you don't let go, if you try to control them or manipulate them, you just find yourself like battling them, and it doesn't give them the space to really take the support, to take the feedback. If you're trying to, unearth what's went wrong, try to ask questions that start with what and how, to lead the recipients to discovering what went wrong. So let's say, how could we have done better, instead of saying, we should have done this better. Asking, what was it that made the project not successful or successful? So trying to discover what is behind, or was the problem or the thing that led to leading it wrong. So especially when you first do this, if you're setting that, giving that first feedback, creating that relationship, it's very important to watch your tone and how you approach it, and really make sure that the other person understands that you are sharing this because you care. So let your concern shine through in how you're saying things, because again, no one cares how much you know until they know that you actually care about them. And we tend to just tune out any criticism if it just seems like the other person just wants to point out what we did wrong, but not out of a spirit of helping us grow. Yeah, and when you ask your teammates or your volunteers for feedback, you can also ask them to hold you accountable. So you could either request, to meet again, have some kind of check-in, to kind of see if you're still on track with, following or doing whatever you said you weren't going to do anymore. So let's say you're always interrupting people in meetings, and that was the criticism, then, allow them to tell you or give you a sign or something that you just interrupted somebody again. So you can have them help you learn from the feedback that you have been given, and then grow in not doing the same thing. And then also think about what feedback you are wanting to give, and if the feedback is truly meant for them and not to make your life better. So you want to position the advice to being of service to your teammate or volunteer. And then last tip, recognize your volunteers' accomplishments. Small amounts of focused and positive energy can create exponential benefits throughout an organization. If you have a culture of praise and celebration, that complements caring and accountability. So in any relationship, professional or personal, you never know how your seemingly small words of praise sometimes or celebration might really inspire a pivotal moment in someone else's life. Know your volunteers and praise and celebrate them the way you know they would like to be appreciated. So try to find out, what they like. If you have somebody who is a little more shy, they might feel really uncomfortable if you call them out on a stage and, blast out their accomplishments. So try to find out how they want to be appreciated and try to recognize them in that way. And focus on creating an enjoyable volunteer experience that will feel rewarding instead of just thinking about, one time a year big celebrations. And you can also, again, go back to those volunteer motivations. Why did they come to you to volunteer? And try to tie the recognition back to what their interests are, what their preferences are, and what motivates them to volunteer with you. Yeah, and for those volunteers who have that values as motivation, it's especially important to recognize their success and reassure them that their contributions really make a difference and show that difference to them, show them their impact. When you celebrate people for doing things right, you often find that they are much more energized and engaged in fixing what they also have done wrong. So if you see things that your volunteers do really well, celebrate that and note that. Let them know that you really like what they're doing, because then they will continue that behavior and it'll help, your whole organization. They'll feel happy that, and to see how they're doing something well, and that recognition means a lot in a small way. Since a large majority of volunteers want to see the impact they are making, sorry. Yeah, quick sip of tea, too much talking. So you could use infographics to show your impact. I put on a couple on the slide here from us, just showing people, what they have accomplished in numbers. They can see they're part of this bigger team of volunteers, and see the overall, big picture. They are part of this, and they have helped get those 4,311 meals to those isolated seniors. They're part of that. Even if they themselves, they might have delivered, 300, but seeing how they all come together and collectively make a larger impact is really powerful. If you can collect stories from your volunteers as well and share them with the other volunteers, that's also really meaningful and helps volunteers connect with each other. And it's also a great recruitment strategy, because others see what great impact you're making and having, and see the stories, hear the stories, and know what the opportunities will be like as well. So I'm going to go through this quickly. I don't know, Sydney, are we okay on time?
Yeah, you have 20 minutes left.
Okay, good. Then we're going to go through these different motivations that volunteers might have, and just look at some different ways that you can recognize that and kind of foster that involvement there. So if somebody has the values as a motivation for volunteering, communicating that impact is super important. You want to have clear and achievable goals for those volunteers in their volunteer role, so that they can really see, okay, I've reached my goal, I've made that, and that will be meaningful. If you can involve them in some decision making, that's always great. If you're giving out any awards or plaques, anything like that, make sure when you're giving those out, you really connect them back again to the impact that that volunteer has made and try to be very specific there. Opportunities to advance within the organization can also be a wonderful way to, you know, recognize somebody, support somebody on their journey and help them grow. So if you have, you know, leadership opportunities for staff, maybe there's some classes that your staff is taking, and if you can invite a volunteer that you know is interested in a specific topic to that, that'd be a wonderful way to, you know, get more people excited. Then volunteers have a career, understanding motivated for volunteering. They are looking often to build some career relevant skills or networking. So providing some of those opportunities will be, you know, a wonderful way to give them what they are looking for. You could also provide letters of recommendation or commendation to their supervisor, or focus on, you know, any skills that they have gained while volunteering with you and that they have used to show and give them something tangible in their hand that will help them in their career. Inviting volunteers to be part of any staff, board, or community presentations might also be a great way to recognize them and show their accomplishments. It's also a great way to learn presentation skills. And then also, you know, you have a volunteer share something with the community and they show their excitement by presenting. It'll be a two-way street as well again, because your board members and the community will be more excited to hear from a volunteer often than a staff member, because it's more authentic. You could also create any networking opportunities. So if there's, you know, several volunteers in the same field, or if your staff is involved in any networking opportunities, maybe there's a happy hour or something, you could take them to and just kind of help them build their network. Will also be a great way to, you know, reward them for volunteering with you. And giving those volunteers a little bit of decision-making power will, you know, be a great skill to learn as well. So if they can, you know, on a project, make the decisions for that, they can show their leadership skills or learn them by volunteering with you. Volunteers who are socially motivated prioritize relationship building. So if you're doing any recognition, you want to include their peers and family. So kind of create opportunities where they can all be together and recognized. You could also try and, you know, feature them in agency spotlights, or if you're doing a newsletter, you could feature different volunteers in there, or share some of the stories with like a local news article. Personal thank you notes are always great and one of my favorites. And if you can make sure, you know, the supervisors or director at your organizations, if they are around the volunteers, use some of those tidbits that you gathered about your volunteers and maybe share that with directors so they can make an easy connection with your volunteers. So, you know, if you have volunteer John, who is a big football fan, just share that with your director and they can go there and thank them for their service, but then also kind of make a connection through a common interest. If you can create some kind of opportunities to work in teams, or you know, assignments where they accomplish something together, that would be great for those kinds of volunteers. And they often enjoy, you know, recognition events, or kind of more casual than that, than a big gala, but maybe thinking of, you know, doing an ice cream social or a picnic in the park, something more casual where they can just get to know each other as part of the volunteer team. If you are giving anything like a t-shirt or any gadget that's some show off their affiliation with your organization, that might also be interesting to those who have that social motivation. I know, Sydney, you always say you're a big fan of t-shirts. So, doing that might be good. Then those volunteers who have that protective motivation, so they were the ones who tried to reduce their guilt over being more fortunate than others through volunteering. So you want to really connect the dots for them to show them how much value their contribution has, and offer some kind of more of an emotional support. You could check in them with them on a little more frequently. Could take them out for a cup of tea or coffee or a little walk around the neighborhood and do one of those personal professional check-ins. I think is especially important for this group of volunteers. Also, like the volunteer of the month parking spot and regular rotation. If your organization has that available, it's kind of nice. Parking around Nashville is often crazy, so I totally get that. But depending on where you are, maybe parking is not an issue, and then that one wouldn't work. The enhancement motivation, so they're looking to really, have a positive influence in their life, and it's great for those volunteers to not only recognize them for, the overall impact, but also for just the involvement, for greatest effort or improvement and learning through trial and error. So recognizing the small accomplishments. You could also create a volunteer acknowledgement wall, maybe next to the major donor list, and hang it up and come up with some criteria of who will be included, how many hours or what kind of impact they have had to make to be put on there. But I think that will also show, board members and others who visit your organization that not only, the donors who give us the money are important, the volunteers' contributions to their time are just as valuable. So putting it on the same scale as the donors, I think is wonderful. And any fun organization-wide volunteer celebrations, in person or virtual, also a wonderful way to just get people together and celebrate all the accomplishments they have made for your organization. I was able to give a really quick update to our board yesterday from our 2021, and I showed some of the numbers and put the dollar amounts up there and shared some stories, and I could really see how it clicked in some of the board members' faces. They are just like, wow, this is really a lot that the volunteers do, and it does have a lot of meaning and big impact. Then just a couple more bonus tips on writing great thank you notes, because they are one of my favorites for sure. When I've gotten one, it's always made my day and made me smile. So I've write them quite a bit for my volunteers. I think volunteers really understand that we are busy, we have a lot of things to do, and just taking the time to personally write up a thank you note makes them feel very valuable. I've often gotten a quick email back thanking me for the thank you card, which is funny, but that shows you that the volunteers really valued, getting that and having it be personal. So just a couple tips if you want to do that as well. So the key is really to make it focused on their achievements and making it personal and fitting to them. So tell them specifically what you've noticed, what they have done great, or where they went above and beyond, or if it is like they're always there for you whenever you need them, you make a call and they show up. Let them know how much you value that. And yeah, be specific. Don't say, thanks for your time and commitment. I mean, that's good, but like if you can say, thank you for staying late yesterday to make those additional 3 counseling calls to Medicare beneficiaries. Then that really shows, okay, you saw the time they took to stay longer and you noticed what they have given to your organization. Or, I also don't always write them just as thank you notes. Sometimes it's a thank you slash, I learned that a family member is in the hospital or something like that. I try to, if somebody lets me know that, write a card right after that and just let them know, I'm thinking about them and just trying to connect on that and letting them know it's okay to take a step back for the moment, so they don't worry about that. Because it's interesting, some of our volunteers are so committed. They, we had one, a tree fell on her house. She had to move out, and the first thing she did, she was calling us, letting us know, she couldn't volunteer and give that presentation that she had scheduled for the next morning. And when I hear stuff like that, I'm always like, it's amazing, how making that connection with your volunteers really leads them to just be there for you, and they are, thinking of you really as part of your family, and not just, a volunteer stuff that they're doing every once in a while. Okay, I digress here. So point out something specific. Connect the impact to the mission. So if you can, again, relate back what they did and how that has helped the organization and the overall mission of what they're doing, that's always great. And then, as I said, write it in a timely fashion. So, take the time. If you heard something, saw something, if you have some thank you notes handy, just, try and do it right away so it's all still fresh in your mind and the volunteer still remembers that they did it too. If you wait too long, they might have forgotten. And it doesn't have that same effect. And 5, be vulnerable and share something of yourself if you can. So if, the volunteer has really helped you out and it has helped you in your job, you can tell them that and just let them know how they're helping you as a leader of the volunteers as well. Then here I have my resources for you, and I think Sydney will share the slides with you later so you can have them and click on them directly. So feel free to check them out. What are your takeaways? Anything you want to let me know? Something you learned today that you want to share with the rest of the group? And are there any questions? You can either unmute and ask and speak or write in the chat.
Rebecca, amazing presentation. I'm getting a little echo. So I'm not sure.
Oh, I'm
sorry. But just a couple things that I wrote down. I love your slide that said a promise of joy when it comes to when you go out and recruit and advertise for your programs. I thought that was, I'm going to be using that. And then the quote that you had with, we have two ears and one mouth, so that means we should listen twice as hard. And wow, do I need to practice that. But great information. Thank you so much. I think we have some people who are typing in, so we might have some questions here in a couple minutes.
All right, I'll pull up the chat here so I can see.
But yeah, as Rebecca mentioned, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions or type those into the chat box. And Rebecca, yeah, if you could send me those slides, I'm happy to send that out to everyone.
Yes.
And then while we're waiting for some questions, you're getting a lot of positive feedback in the chat box as well. I just want to let everybody know about a couple upcoming trainings that are coming up. And then I'll turn it back over to Rebecca. And I'll have these links and things in the email follow-up that I'll hopefully have out by this afternoon. So Volunteer Pro, they have a free webinar. So this is usually a service that has like a membership fee, but every now and then they'll come out with some freebies and they're really great. It's how to fund your volunteer program. So part of me is like, oh, she stole my idea that we did in March. But at the same time, Volunteer Pro has a lot more knowledge and expertise than I do. So I think that's a great webinar if you all are interested in attending that one. There's 2 times that you can attend. There's a session this afternoon, so hurry up and get on that. Or I'll be attending next Tuesday, May 24th. So I'll send that information out as well to everyone in case you're interested, or register, and she usually records them so you can listen at a later time as well. I've mentioned this one a couple times, but the Points of Light Conference, the largest volunteer conference in the world, is coming up July 13th to the 15th. It's in Orlando, Florida at Disney's Colorado Springs Resort. So wouldn't that be lovely to be able to attend? Luckily for those of us who are on limited budgets, there is a virtual option. So it's a hybrid conference, and the virtual rate is $146. The in-person rate, since we're most likely government nonprofit, is about $675 for a 3-day training. So as we look at our budgets, hopefully some of us will at least be able to attend that virtual option. The next thing I wanted to let you all know about, the Tennessee Federation for the Aging, or TFA, is working on their annual conference. I'm on the board and the conference committee for that, so I'll say we are working on it. We're looking for speaker proposals for 20 different breakout sessions. So I'll send information on that and the speaker proposal if anyone is interested in presenting at the conference. It is October 25th to the 27th in Pigeon Forge. And we have some different tracks. So you have the Senior Center's Healthy Aging track, Aging in Place Long-Term Care Services and Supports track, Elder Rights and Justice track, and then we've added a public safety so we can get more of a emergency responders, fire, police perspective on some aging issues. So it'd be great if anyone wants to submit a proposal to speak at that conference, or we'll have more information on registration if anyone would like to attend that conference here in the next couple of months. So I'll send some information on that as well. And then the last thing, I just wanted to remind you all that our next session will be June 16th. It's crazy to say that it's almost June already. We're already halfway through our series. It's bananas to me. But Corina Sadler, who talked to us at the beginning of the series, will be back. She's going to talk to us about creating your personal brand yesterday. So a little bit of a marketing twist that we may not have had in previous sessions. So I hope you all will be able to join for that presentation next month. And of course, I'll send all of this information, like I mentioned, in the follow-up email this afternoon. So we got more praise from you, Rebecca, in the chat box, but does anyone have any final thoughts, questions that they'd like to share? Alrighty, well, thank you all so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but we'll hang out for a little bit in case anybody has any questions that they don't want to share while we're recording the webinar. Thank you all so much again, and look forward to talking to you next month.